We know the conversation that is on national tongues right now. We know the things that are happening, and even as we head into that conversation, justice and accountability, rethinking police oversight and legislative action. Johnston Kavuludi is the first chairperson of the National Police Service Commission, and he's here in the Situation Room with us this morning. Bwana Kavuludi, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing fine.
Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room. We will see if we will be joined by Senator for Kisii County, Richard Onyonka, who's supposed to be here. We'll see if he does join us in a bit. However, the conversations will continue. As is our tradition, we go around the African continent every week. We land in a different country and we hear their proverbs. We would like to hear your interpretation of a proverb that Dennis is going to share this hour. Is that all right? Okay.
The proverb today comes from a country within the East Africa region. It calls itself the Pearl of Africa. Heard about it?
The Pearl of Africa?
Yes.
That's Uganda?
Uganda, right?
Yes.
Yes. And in Uganda, there are very many great things about Uganda. It is a country that has 50% of the world's gorillas. It is a country that is considered to be the food basket of the region because they have adequate rain and farming there is booming. That and many more, including a fact that it has one of the presidents considered to be the oldest, 39 years in power, and the wife is equally the what again? The Minister for Education. And the proverb coming from the Pearl of Africa: the hen that stays at home does not find food. The hen that stays at home does not find food. What do you make of that?
That's not an easy one. You see, my interpretation is this. That hen which stays at home already has food. So it doesn't have to to look for it, does it? That's my interpretation. It's adequately provided for, and therefore it doesn't have to go all over the place looking for what to eat. In other words, we are also saying that a person who is properly saddled within the home does not have to go all over the place looking for what may not be available. You are already self-sufficient. That's my thinking.
Fantastic. I mean, and where to find it. Okay. I mean, great to hear that interpretation from you. Bwana Kavuludi, we're in a situation in the country that we normally talk about when you have a bout of illness. By the time your symptoms are bad, you're coughing, you're sneezing, it's been there for a while. Yeah, you've had the illness didn't come with the cough and the sneeze and the headache. It had incubated for a minute, and this is what you see, the outward manifestation of an inward problem. We are in a place today whereby yet another individual has been murdered, and it points to different questions. Extrajudicial killing has been asked, wanton behavior by certain, and not all, we have to be very careful, certain members of a police service previously known as a police force then comes into question. We unfortunately don't have the answers that the nation is looking for in terms of who killed this young man. When those answers will come, we still do not know. And who's going to take responsibility for the overall action that we see, unfortunately, manifesting in a death today, a torture tomorrow, a disappearance the day after. And sadly, but unfortunately, it points back to the police service. And that's the situation in which we are in today. From your point of view, as the first chairperson of the National Police Service Commission, we're going to get some insights from you today, and it would be great if we can just look into some of them from where we are today. And just giving a bit of a background, of course we know where we are, and we were in Senate, we heard from the Senate floor yesterday the questions that were asked, the answers that were given, but it doesn't paint a very clear picture of for us in terms of where we are. Can we get, from your point of view, what should happen at this point? Where should our thinking be going when we seek these answers that we can't find?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, let me take this opportunity to pass my condolences to the family of the brilliant young man that we lost through what clearly is police brutality. At that level, at that age, is very painful, not only to the parents, but to the entire nation, that we should lose young people at that age with the kind of education he had received and the expectations by this nation and the entire society where he comes from. It's very unfortunate that that has had to happen yet again. I'm saying yet again because for a long time we have had a lot of murders associated with the police service. And I want to indicate that for me, as the first chairman of the National Police Service Commission, I had no misgivings when I took up the appointment as the chairperson of the National Police Service Commission. I saw it as a daunting task, but I felt that together with the team that had been given, we will be in a position to carry out police reforms. And one of the key reforms included ensuring that we inculcate skills, changes, especially soft skills in police officers that will make a difference when it comes to the handling of, the population, Kenyans and other people. And so what we are seeing is a manifestation of what people may say a rogue police service, but I won't put it so. I will indicate that we still have elements within the police service who do not as yet appreciate the fact that changes have been made, changes are expected to continue being made, and Kenyans look up to the police service for purposes of protecting them rather than what we are seeing today. So in a sense, we should be asking questions, especially to the police leadership. Unfortunately, it may not be the entire police leadership. Currently, I will tell you, because I worked with the majority of the senior police officers there now, we have a very competent Inspector General.
Okay.
A very nice personality, a person who is well-trained, well-informed, and a down-to-earth individual whom we can trust. The problem is, can we trust many of the junior officers below him? That may not be so. The majority of them may still have vestiges of the past.
What would make you say that, Bonakavuludi?
I say so because we started off by coming up with a new structure in the police service, a command structure. And it became very difficult for the middle level up to the top police officers to appreciate that the changes we were bringing about would benefit the entire police service. In fact, the thinking was we were taking over the command and control of the police service as a commission, when the reality was that the majority of police officers, right, those who are in the lower ranks, felt that they were oppressed. They felt that they were misused, very often abused. And a lot of times they were used by politicians to serve political interests or rich people to serve economic interests. So what we are seeing is indicative of the fact that we may have to rethink our strategy in police reforms. Where we are headed does not seem to be giving us the opportunity to get it right. And I say so because in my thinking, I say that there's been a lot of interference coming from the political arena in terms of ensuring that we don't quite change the police service to be a real service serving the Kenyan. That is what I say.
Mr. Kavuludi, you've talked about rethinking the strategy. How easy is it, one? And you've also spoken about influence. during your tenure as chair of the National Police Service Commission, there was a time where you had death threats on your own life, and you actually received a decapitated human head that was delivered to your office. And there was even a time when there was a threatening letter with chemical substances that was addressed to you and your fellow Commissioner Mido Mohammed at the time. You were the first chair trying to spearhead this change and this rethinking. How heavy is this pushback from the influences that you've spoken about to effect these changes?
I'll say the pushback is quite heavy. For some time, there was the feeling, especially arising from the executive office of the president, I'm talking about Harambee House, that this commission had taken over the power that went with the controlling the police service. And therefore, it needed to have its wings clipped. And there were very specific officers that were detailed to ensure that we do not quite settle down and function in a manner that will make it easy, smooth for us to carry out the police reform process. And yet, clearly, police reforms could not have been done single-handedly by the National Police Service Commission. It is a responsibility that fell upon the shoulders of everybody in government and the entire Kenyan population when you consider that we are looking at a civilian police service, not a militarized police service. So, when you saw the scare that was placed upon me, it was so that I may resign, or the other commissioners also give up. And I'll tell you clearly that that is what encouraged me much more, because I saw that there is need for us to continue with the process of reform, because somebody is uncomfortable. And when it looked like I was unrelenting and the commissioners with whom I worked were unrelenting, the next thing that followed included, and that was the biggest of the problems, changing the law to give less authority to the commission. In 2014 and in 2016, the National Police Service Act and the National Police Service Commission Act underwent fundamental changes to remove certain powers from the commission. And one of those powers which were removed was the power to initiate the hiring and firing of the police command, the top police officers. That is the Inspector General and the Deputy Inspectors General, plus the Director of Criminal Investigations. That was moved from the commission to the president.
Okay.
So today, we can see that any Inspector General, any Deputy Inspector General has to be too careful not to be removed at the spur of the moment. Because as it stood then under the National Police Service Act, which was the original one, an officer at that level had the security of tenure. Now the IG, the DIGs don't have the security of tenure. Anybody can get around it, and tomorrow you hear that person is not there. But number two, it also emboldened the certain officers, the realization that this commission may not do much to us. But most importantly, when it came to the attention of those who may have planned and decided that they frustrated that commission, when they realized that we are carrying on, and especially with what was provided for under the law, that is under the National Police Service Act, Section 7, which required us, as a process of transition into a police service from a police force, to carry out a transitional vetting. A vetting which will require that certain officers who have not distinguished themselves as serving the public be removed from service. Then it became very clear that we may touch certain people that did not be touched at all. Hence the delivery of that head to me. I told them they can deliver 20, provided they're not killing anybody. They can deliver 20, 100. But then they also went ahead and said, okay, we will send you a bomb in an envelope, which was done. Fortunately, I didn't open it. Oh, they sent poisoned substances. Fortunately, I didn't open it. But subsequently, other commissioners who came in after me were intimidated enough not to raise their heads so high because the Kavuludi Commission was impossible. And I will say that the excesses we are seeing today as a result of officers being emboldened. And by the way, it is not all the officers. When we carried out the vetting process and we removed from the service men and women we thought did not deserve to be in the police service, at the end of each level, we realized that between 3 and 4% of the officers needed to be removed from the service. The rest of them were impeccable, or they were satisfactory, or they were men and women who were professional, competent, and suitable to continue serving the public.
Mr. Kavuludi, we look at the vetting exercise that took place during your time and how that was such a big issue with regard to Kenyans finally getting to trust the police and the services that they offer to them. And we look at years later today and the trust, the fabric and between the public and the police has really destroyed. So in terms of just bringing back the good job that you did in fixing the police, just how bad is it and how much work is needed to bringing back the police into a service and not a force? Because it seems as though we are going back to a force.
Let's not be too pessimistic. I still think that we are not too badly off. But we seem to have certain remnants of the police service, especially in command positions, who will want to use officers in the lower ranks for purposes of achieving certain ends, certain objectives that are not in consonance with what society expects. I will tell you that there are times when the commission will be given names of persons who we needed to promote. And, being a person who is well grounded in human capital management, I'll say, and the commissioners will ask, what is it that they have done that will merit their promotion? And they will be told that this is a decision that has been arrived at a very high level, and it is proper that they be given the new ranks that have been recommended. It happened once or twice, and we said, no, it's not going to work, because we have an Inspector General who should make very clear recommendations, because one of our responsibilities, and is defined in the Constitution, is to determine promotions. Not to promote. The promotion is the work of the Inspector General. Ours is to ensure that promotions are being done in a manner that is not discriminative, in a meritorious manner, and in a manner that gives satisfaction to those who are promoted, even those who are not promoted, that is being done fairly. So what did we discover? And which we were not being told. Some of those people had been used to carry out dirty jobs. And because we are not quite inside, we will not be told that this is what they have done. And it made us to become extremely sensitive to anything that we were not very well briefed about. So like we saw recently, these officers who we understand went to arrest this young man, what happened in between and what may have motivated what happened can be anybody's guess. Because we don't really believe, I don't believe that those officers were as innocent in what they did. It's not going to be prejudicial, but I think that there is an excessive manner in which they exercised the process of arresting, and it led to the situation that we are all grieving over in Kenya.
Baraka Vuludi, as things stand, if you are the current chair of the National Police Service Commission, because we saw yesterday in the Senate all this questioning, and there was sort of like a passing of the baton, shifting blame, and nobody wanted to take responsibility. In this case of the Deputy Inspector General Eliud Lagat, would you then have recommended for him to step aside, allow investigations to be carried out, or even do a statement at a police station? How would you have handled his situation right now? Because he's at the center of it.
The National Police Service Commission, in dealing with the human capital management, has both an advisory role and also the executive role, where definite decisions are made. For example, the National Police Service Commission can dismiss. But the National Police Service Commission may dismiss only when due process has been followed. In this case, one, the allegation is that the Deputy Inspector General, Mr. Lagat, is behind what has happened. Now, all these calls, the fury that goes with it, the anger that you see, is something which should prick anybody's conscience. So first of all, before you even look at the aspect of recommendation, in good faith, where there is good manners, there is good hygiene, I would really expect that Mr. Lagat will say, okay, I know I'm innocent. I want to step aside and give an opportunity to this process to carry on. I know I'm not directly involved in carrying out the investigation, but there are people who may have served under me and are carrying out these investigations. And I want the general public to get to understand that I'm clean. I only made a recommendation. So I step aside and let this process carry on.
Okay, Kavuludi is the first chairperson of the National Police Service Commission and is our guest this hour. Of course, continuing our conversation around, as tragic as it is that a man is dead, and we can point this towards excesses, a brutal murder of a young man. We can point this towards excesses of a few individuals within the police service. We do not know that it can be anybody else because he's said to have been in their custody from the point he left Homa Bay until we see his body in Nairobi. Now, you talk about the fact that there are those who are high up in rank calling the shots here, and that there are still some rogue elements even after calls for reform in the sector, and that somebody may not have gotten their hands bloody, but they could have given orders. And I'm going to make a parallel between the very, very public case of the genocide that happened in Rwanda. That a lot of the people who went to the ICC and a lot of people who were convicted, one Felicien Kabuga, for example, didn't get his hands bloody. But he was arrested because he gave an order. There was a warrant that was put on his head because he gave an order. Without the order, 800,000 people, for example, in one area would not have been killed. Without the order, women would not have been brutally raped. Without the order, people would not have been killed. Without that order, these things would not have happened. So in as much as you may not have been the one who carried out the physical act, that something was done because an order was given. Do we see within the police service that we are acting on order? Or are people allowed to do what they want without an order?
Now, this is a very precarious situation. Precarious indeed. And I say so because I would like to draw a parallel between the National Police Service and call it the teaching service. We have a Director General for Education, and we have an Inspector General for the Police Service. Right down in the sub-counties, we have a chief principal or a principal of a school. They are responsible to the Director General in terms of managing finances and so on. They are responsible to the Teacher Service Commission Secretary in terms of running or managing the teachers. Something goes wrong at the school. The principal there is a very senior person, but something goes wrong. Responsibility will be borne by the person at the top. The assumption here is that you did not do your work well enough to ensure that the principal on the ground is doing the work. What I see in the police service is the kind of thing where there are too many people in charge of various command positions at the county, at the sub-county, at the station level, and so on. Some of whom have taken to excesses to the extent that even the Inspector General gets to learn of it when already they have committed very, very serious mistakes of the kind that should never have happened at all. And in such a situation, what I will expect is the command of the police service to immediately take action against those offending officers. You do not wait for anything to happen.
Why wouldn't they have been arrested by now? And I'm asking this question directly because we saw that Albert Ojwang was arrested. He was arrested on suspicion of him having made maligning posts on social media about one Eliud Lagat. He was the complainant. IG Douglas Kanja pointed to him during a presser and said the complainant is here, and had said this was the issue. Now, in that case, Albert Ojwang was arrested, right? On suspicion. Here, there are many officers who were within the vicinity of Albert Ojwang, and he was murdered. Why would we see that there is slow action in terms of arresting anybody who was within a whiff perimeter of this young man? Why do we not see that they have been arrested?
Well, I wouldn't quite say that they be arrested. They should have been arrested instantaneously. You see, we have got police operating procedures. There are standards that have got to be met, and procedures which cannot be skipped when it comes to dealing with police officers, and they need fair treatment as well. If we immediately say that a police officer, once mentioned, gets arrested, I think we will be being unfair.
This young man was mentioned and arrested immediately. He was taken from Homa Bay to Nairobi without question because somebody complained. And then he was murdered, and then we're still saying that, okay, well, perhaps we should think about it before we arrest anybody who had anything to do with him before he died. Why?
My point is this. You can see what the Inspector General did. The Inspector General immediately interdicted. To interdict in government, having been there for so many years, means that you stop that person from performing their duties, until investigations are carried out. And after interdiction, you may be suspended from work, or you may be dismissed, or you may come back to work, but your rank is reduced. There are many things that could happen to such an individual. So already that is an indication that there is seriousness on the part of the Inspector General to take action. But what I'm thinking may not have happened, and which should really have happened, is that the trail from I think it's Mawego police station, we should have had action being taken all the way from there, right? Because somebody in there should be able to give an indication of what it is that they saw all the way. And I really don't believe that this young man was brought all the way from Homa Bay County straight to Central Police Station. There must have been a detour somewhere where he was beaten into pulp, because that is what appears happened. And that place is where we will expect that serious officers at the level of investigation will want to find out what happened in between, because this seems to have been the case. And I'm saying that as at now, I want to believe that serious action is being taken towards establishing who is culpable. Let's not be in such a rush that we even net persons that, because if you arrest, that's an extreme action. But if you stop somebody from working, that's a good action. It's an indication that you're beginning to take measures of the kind that should be taken.
They stopped Albert from living. Not even from just working. They stopped him from living. And then and I hear where you're going, Bwana Kavuludi. But the question is that we don't see a reciprocate action. We are saying, well, let's be fair and follow process, whereby process was not followed when it came to his arrest, his interrogation, and his death, his murder. So the question is here, and I hear what you're saying in terms of process, but then one must ask, Dennis did a brilliant parallel between when we saw the late Member of Parliament, Ongondowere, murdered in May, and within a very quick period of time, there were suspects that had been identified, they had been charged and brought before a court of law, there was condemnation from the highest echelons of government. All of these things happened in rapid succession. The same police service, not anybody else, the same police service. But here, there's a possibility that one of their own might be named, and then we see a very tortoise-like movement when it comes to getting answers. Why would that be?
My thinking is that the movement is not tortoise. Clearly, if you see what IPOA has set out to do and is doing, I want to see that from the light of very swift action being undertaken. I know where you may be headed, and where the majority of Kenyans are headed. It is, why is Lagat still in office? I want to tell you, my thinking is that you see, the president of this country has appointing powers. He also has powers to hire. The president of this country also wants to be seen and should be seen as a person who listens. He hears, he listens, and he is surrounded by persons who advise him. Unfortunately, I'm not one of those. Fortunately, there are many others who advise him, and I'll have thought that he will have taken executive action, because that is the only way people will begin to trust him. That's the way they will trust his government, because I see that is where everybody is focused. And if that will help in telling Kenyans that we are taking action that will be long-lasting, it will be a good example that even you, who is in a high position, when you make a mistake of the kind that gets the whole nation gripped with fear, running in fury, I think we will need to take action immediately.
Bwana Kavuludi, it seems to me, by watching the proceedings of the Senate yesterday, so we had first the Interior CS, Murkomen, saying he's also waiting to see the results of the investigations. He has no clue what happened. So he seemed to pass the blame to the IG and is waiting for the Inspector General of Police to give clarity on what exactly happened. Then when the IG stood to give an account of what happened to Albert Ojwang, he also seemed to push the the blame to, not the blame, to push the back to IPOA. Same thing with the DCI boss. The president also, in his statement, also mentioned IPOA and said he wants speedy investigations. Now, the IPOA we're talking about here, the chair, Ahmed Issa Hassan, said that in just the past year alone, 136 deaths have been linked to police officers, with an additional 59 people reported to have died in police custody. So, those are the numbers. Now, let's look at executing their mandates. The challenge is here because budget constraints have been repeatedly mentioned and cited in parliamentary reports and by IPOA officials as a major limitation to fulfilling its mandate. So among the challenges that IPOA, and Issa Hassan saying this, is executing its mandate effectively, they include resource limitations, including a shortage of investigators, operational tools, budget constraints, and non-cooperation from some police officers. These appears to be the same thing that happened to your commission when you took over, the pushback. So my question then is there really independent oversight over police misconduct and extrajudicial killings where we have roles on paper but no executional powers because of all these limitations?
Government is a very interesting institution, eh? Our government. I want to tell you this, that there are certain actions that are deliberate. In my thinking, there are certain actions that are deliberate. IPOA was created to cure a serious problem, but IPOA is facing a lot of roadblocks. I don't think that we are short of resources in this country to make IPOA operate. The same way I'll tell you that many independent commissions today are struggling to perform their mandate. I want to think that we should be open enough as a country to say things as they are. And in my opinion, we are not serious when it comes to getting institutions that are independent to work, to function, to be productive. IPOA, if what they are asking for was given, we should be in a position now to say, if you fail, then you have failed Kenyans, and you should not blame anybody. But as it is now, if we go round in circles, it is the Kenyan public that suffers. Clearly, I want to tell you, as government, there is need for a lot more seriousness. And I'm saying so because we are not painting a very good picture to the international community or even to everybody in this country. If anybody were to come to this country and look at what is going on, look at every TV station, what they're broadcasting, one will think that we are in a very chaotic state. It is the police brutality, police killings, is police this, police that, and so on. Can we minimize this by getting people to do what they need to do? And this is where sometimes I think that very strict measures being taken instantaneously on certain things may make people pull back and say, wait a minute, we should not be doing this because the repercussions will be very severe. And that is why when, for example, we took certain actions as a National Police Service Commission, it shook the service to a very, very large extent. And even when one was traveling, one will notice that there's been a change. We would like to see that change by giving support or support being given to police officers so that whenever they take action, we do not have retribution of the kind that tells them you should not have been doing that.
Bonakavuludi, because of time, very quickly, do you believe that the structural reforms that you oversaw as the first chair of the National Police Service were either hijacked or reversed over the years to where we are today?
I believe that they were both hijacked and reversed. Why do I say hijacked? You see, I have seen people who should not be taking certain actions or making certain decisions, taking decisions that the National Police Service Commission should be making. And I sit back and ask myself, what happened? I thought this is the role of the National Police Service Commission. Why is it being undertaken by officers elsewhere who are not part of this independent commission? So that is hijacking what the National Police Service Commission is supposed to be doing. 2, they were reversed in the sense that, I'll tell you, and I'll tell Kenyans, if one goes to the records, one will find that some of the things that we have done lately were unnecessary. For example, we didn't need the task force. That's my view. By the Chief Justice Emeritus Maraga. We didn't need it. Much of what they recommended, they picked
From what you had previously done.
what we had done. Absolutely everything. So all that was required was for those who are around the head of state to tell him, we have all this information. What we need is that this should be acted upon. And if it was acted upon, we'll have saved time, we'll have saved money. So I strongly believe that this reversal is a terrible thing. The hijacking has not been good for this country. And I want to believe that those people who hold office should not be afraid that if they take certain actions, which is their responsibility, they'll be removed from office. Boldness is what makes people perform.
Indeed. Johnson Kavuludi has joined us this morning, and we've had this conversation around, what we see as that glaring symptom, but really what's happening in the back end. And thank you for joining us in this conversation this morning.
This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.